creating the variable outside of the if statement, like this. We can use a similar solution with functions. To make this variable exist outside the function, we just have to create it outside the function. So let's select this code. We're going to right-click. The reason this happens is because functions create a scope. In the previous lesson, we learned about scopes, which limit where a variable exists. We learned about if statements, and that if statements create a scope between the curly brackets. This means that any variable created between the curly brackets only exists between the curly brackets. Functions also create name, pick, computer, move, open bracket, close script. The reason we created this function in the script element is because remember that the script element runs when the page is loaded. So we want to make sure that we create the function first, and then we use it in the buttons after. Now remember, this code just creates a function. It doesn't actually run the code inside. To run the code inside, we're going to call this function. So let's scroll up to the scissors button, and we're going to call this function by typing the function name pick computer move open bracket, close bracket, and semicolon. If we save and then click the scissors button, unfortunately, it now gives us an error saying computer move is not defined. Now, this might seem weird because down here, we actually create the computer move. So what's going on? The reason this happens is because functions create a scope. In the previous lesson, we learned about scopes, which limit where a variable exists. We learned about if statements, and that if statements create a scope between the curly brackets. This means that any variable created between the curly brackets only exists. Save. And then click the scissors button. Unfortunately, it now gives us an error saying computer move is not defined. Now, this might seem weird because down here, we actually create a functions button, and we're going to call this function. So when the script element is because remember that the script element runs when the page is loaded. So we want to make sure that we create the function first, and then we use it in the buttons after. Now remember, this code just creates a function. it doesn't actually run the code inside. To run the code inside, we're going to call this function. So let's scroll up to the scissors button, and we're going to call this function by typing the function name pick computer move, open bracket, close bracket, and semicolon. If we save and then click the scissors button, unfortunately, it now gives us an error saying computer move is not defined. Now, this might seem weird because down here, computer move is not defined. Now, this might seem weird because down here, we actually create the computer move. So what's going on? The reason this happens is because functions create a scope. In the previous lesson, we learned about scopes, which limit where a variable exists. We learned about if statements, and that if statements create a scope between the curly brackets. This means that any variable created between the curly brackets only exists between the curly brackets. Functions also create a scope. Any variable that is created between these curly brackets only exists inside the curly brackets, and we can't use it outside the curly brackets like we do here. So that's why we're getting this error. So how do we solve this problem? Remember that with if statements, we solve this by creating the variable outside of the if statement, like this. We can use a similar solution with functions. To make this variable exist outside the function, we just have to create it outside the function. So let's select this code. We're going to right-click and cut and remove these lines. And then outside the function, we're going to right-click and paste. So now this variable is no longer inside the function's scope, and it can be used like this. We can use a similar solution with functions. To make this variable exist outside the function, we just have to create it outside the function. So let's select this code. We're going to right-click and cut and remove these lines. And then outside the function, we're going to right-click and paste. So now this variable is no longer inside the function's scope, and it can be used anywhere else in the code. So variables like this that can be accessed anywhere are called global variables. If we save and now click the scissors button, everything is working.
Let's check on something. Okay. So, what's the biggest purpose of this one? What's not clear? Click install on the random. This color is the clear. You found number one. This because I don't know, but this is a random was less hard. Then was real. Then was people. Then was a service. Then let results. It clicks to something we don't know. Like the one is true. This is what's wrong. Then our results will tie if we click the rock that is. Then we lose. Scissors, I win. Rock and scissors. Do I win? If we don't move with scissors, then rock smashes scissors, of course. Yeah, scissors button, the rock button, yeah. Scissors button, no, click. Hey, it should be button and click. Was that all messed up? And look, no. I tried to talking to nothing. I button on link. Yeah. Even with no set for people, the blue buttons you never call big employment or legitimate. You try to put it forward. This employment is on the point. Okay. Once the spot is correct. Okay. Shift down. Right. Yes. Come. Over. Big complaints. You start picking a checking if content equals wrong on this. But you never assign component inside a function. Instead, you should assign it like you did for rock button. Okay. And for the rock button, all you know, select component is something. Well, to the game. Yeah. Down. Boom. Zero. Let's control memory. Okay, so this is what I did. Let's go download this. Now we just get rid of this and let's results. Let's go to this. And then use function number. Okay. Let's see. Let's just this here. Mm, mm, mm. Alright. Let's just go download. And let's go download their results with the students. Really not paying. Can I declare block scope build? Okay, I think we need to get rid of that nonsense. Okay, so let's go with this also. The function is taken care of well. Cool. Now, what are dealing with the student? Result. If results is done, result. Result. What's going to click the result? Okay. Okay, so then
Again,
think
because this code above can now access this variable. Now let's press OK, and let's use this function to reuse this code. So we'll scroll up to the paper button, and now instead of all this code again, we're just going to remove it and call the function. Pick computer move, open bracket, close bracket, semicolon, and also with the rock button. We'll select all this code and remove it and just call the function. Pick computer move, brackets and semicolon. Now, if we save and click the rock button, it works just like before. We'll press OK and click the paper button. It also works just like before. So as you can see, functions let us reuse code, and they make our code a lot cleaner.
Let's result equal this. If computer starts, down, look the button click.
By removing all the duplication that we have.
What difference? Result is not defined. Result is not defined.
Another benefit of removing duplication is that before, if we ever wanted to update the code for picking a computer move, we had to update it in 3 places, in each of the buttons. and paste. So now this variable is no longer inside the function's scope, and it can be used anywhere else in the code. So variables like this that can be accessed anywhere are called global variables. If we save and now click the scissors button, everything is working again because this code above can now access this variable.
It's called
Variable. Now let's press OK, and let's use this function to reuse this code. So we'll scroll up to the paper button.
Okay. That was some choice. So pick computer new days. Let's result equals days. Pick container equals rock. And because it's S if container equals paper. Results equals to an S component equals to one. So that is correct. Then
OK. So we'll scroll up, code again. We're just
so button on code for rock. Deleted for rock. Rock.
going to this code. So we'll scroll up to the paper button.
Paper now.
And now instead of all this code again,
Yeah, updated which is again now. Let's result equals if computer equals this. Okay.
we're just going to remove it and call the function.
Call function.
Pick computer move, open bracket, close bracket, semicolon, and also with the rock button.
And then rock button as well.
We'll select all this code and remove it and just call the function. Pick computer move, brackets and semicolon. Now, if we save and
yeah, pretty much on the same page. Okay, so function pick complement instance random smart random. You're checking compound into the shop before it's not about right. It's a random. What nonsense was I doing? This is stupidity. Come on. This is stupidity. What nonsense did I copy?
click the rock
Even with our notes to keep break. It's nice. Shift down. And then that comes down because this function picking down constant random number to smart random if random number greater than or equal to 0. Shift tab. No, no, don't. It's another. Control S with rock. Okay, scissors.
Button.
Right. Pick paper. Oh, it's foolish. So, that was not exist in this scope. Right. It depends on the button. That's true. Nice other people on the flat sky. Okay. Let's remove the hair from the pick and back. Everything. Okay. Okay. It's not the correct way. Sure. Finish. Aha. Okay.
It works just like before. We'll press OK and click the paper button. It also works just like before. So as you can see, functions let us reuse code, and they make our code a lot cleaner by removing all the duplication that we had. Another benefit of removing duplication is that before, if we ever wanted to update the code for picking a computer move, we had to update it in 3 places, in each of the buttons. But now, if we scroll down, we only have to update it in one place, inside this function. So functions also make our code easier to update in the future. Next, we're going to learn a feature of functions called a return statement. A return statement lets us get a value out of a function. So at the end of this function, let's type some new lines, and we're going to type return, and then a value, like the number 5, and semicolon. Now, whenever we call this function, it will result in a value, the number 5. So up here, when we call this function, this will result in the number 5. So we can actually console.log this, console.log, and then save, and click the scissors button, and it will show us that calling the function now results in the number 5, and we display it in the console. So that's how a return statement works. It lets us get a value out of this function. Let's press OK and do another example. We'll scroll down, and this time let's change this value to the string rock. Now, whenever we call this function, it will result in the string rock. If we save, and then click scissors, and scroll up here, calling this function now results in the string rock. And then we display it in the console. So now let's press OK, and we'll learn the syntax rules for a return statement. So we just have to type the word return and then a value, and it will get this value out of the function. Now, instead of just a value, we can also return a calculation or a variable or anything that results in a value. So this is known as returning a value from a function. And this value is known as the return value. We also don't have to return anything from a function. If a function doesn't have a return statement, or we return without a value, like this will return the value undefined. So if we save and then click scissors again, the function will return undefined. And lastly, when we use a return statement, it ends the function immediately. So after the return statement, if we type console.log the string after and press OK here and save this file, and then click the scissors button, notice that it doesn't run this code. And that's because once we return, the code returns back to where we called the function. That's why it's called a return statement. So it's not going to run anything after the return. So we can remove this code and press OK. So now that we understand return statements, we're going to learn a better way of getting the computer move out of this function. So first, let's actually move this variable back into the function. So we'll right-click and cut, and then in here, right-click and paste, and delete these lines. Learn a better way of getting the computer move out of this function. So first, let's actually move this variable back into the function. So we'll right-click and cut, and then in here, right-click and paste, and delete these lines. So now we're back to the original problem. How do we access computer move outside of the function? So another solution is to return this variable, because remember, a return statement lets us get a value out of the function. So down here, we're going to return the computer move. So this will take whatever value is saved inside computer move, which is one of these values, and return it out of the function. If we save and then click the scissors button, we were able to get the move scissors outside of this function. So what happened here is that we returned this move, and then up here, we took the move and displayed it in the console to get scissors. So that's another way of getting the computer move out of a function using the return statement. However, now we're back to this problem with computer move not being defined because we moved it back into the function's move out of the function. If we save and then click the scissors button here, how do we access computer move outside of the function? So another solution is to return this variable, because remember, a return statement lets us get a value out of the function. So down here, we're going to return the computer move. So this will take whatever value is saved inside computer move, which is one of these values, and return it out of the function. If we save and then click the scissors button, we were able to get the move scissors outside of this function. So what happened here is that we returned this move
Hey, welcome back. So today I gotta explain functions in JavaScript. A function is a section of reusable code. You declare that code once, and you can use it whenever you want. All you have to do is call the function to execute that code. Here's an example. We'll create a function to sing happy birthday. Whenever we call this function, it's gonna sing happy birthday. So to declare a function, you type function, a unique function name. Let's name our function happy birthday, because it's, well, the happy birthday function. Then you add a set of parentheses, then you add a set of curly braces. Any code we write between this set of curly braces, we can reuse whenever we want. So what do we want to do exactly with this function? I'll create the lyrics to my own happy birthday song. Console.log happy birthday to you. Let's repeat that again. Happy birthday, dear you. Happy birthday to you. Trust me, I'm going somewhere with this. So we have a function. When we run the program, it currently doesn't do anything. To execute this code within the function, we have to call the function by its name. Happy birthday. Then add a set of parentheses. So now we should execute this code. Yep, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday dear you, happy birthday to you. So to call a function, you type the function name, then you add a set of parentheses. I like to think of the parentheses as two telephones talking to each other. That's how I remember it. So if I were to call this function again, what do you think's going to happen? Well, we're going to execute this function twice. 3 times? We'll execute it 3 times. As many times as I want, in fact. That's what a function is. It's a section of reusable code. Reuse it whenever you want, you just have to call it. You can send a function some values or variables. Let's change our happy birthday function. I will turn this line into a template literal. Let's replace you with the placeholder. Then we'll add a username. I'll add one more line. We'll use a template literal. You are, insert a placeholder, age, years, old. So when I run this program, we have an uncaught reference error. Username is not defined at happy birthday. So our happy birthday function doesn't know what our username is or the age. So we can send some information to the function when we call it. So within the set of parentheses, what would we like to send this function? Let's send our name. So whatever values you place within the function, be sure to comma separate them. So why don't you go ahead and send the happy birthday function a name and an age. But there's one step missing. These are known as arguments. They're data that you send a function, but you need a matching set of parameters. Within the parentheses of the declaration, in a way we can define some temporary variables, and they're all comma separated. We will define a username parameter, as well as age. Now this function should work properly. Happy birthday, dear bro code, you are 25 years old. So these are parameters, and what you send the function are arguments. Let's call the function, but send different information. Happy birthday. How about SpongeBob? SpongeBob will be, I don't know how old he is according to SpongeBob lore, but let's say he's 30 years old. Happy birthday, dear SpongeBob, you are 30 years old. How about Patrick this time? It's his birthday. Everybody gets a birthday. Patrick will be 37. Happy birthday, dear Patrick, you are 37 years old. So that's a benefit of passing arguments to a function. When the function receives this data, it can do something with it. Now the order of the parameters does matter. If I were to switch age and username, here's what happens. Happy birthday, dear 37, you are Patrick years old. With the arguments that you're passing to your function, you'll want to be sure that the parameters match up. Alright, now I'm going to cover the return keyword. We'll create a few other function examples. We'll create a function to add 2 numbers. Function add. Then we'll need 2 arguments, which we will name x and y. So when we invoke this function, I would like to add x and y together. I'll create a temporary variable named result, just to store the result. Result equals x plus y. So I'm going to add 2 numbers together. Let's add 2 and 3 together, and let's see what happens. Well, nothing appears to happen. Well, we can send some data back to the place in which we call a function, but we need to use this return keyword. Let's return the result. So 2 plus 3 should be 5. After this function resolves, think of this function becoming the value 5. So we'll probably want to do something with that value. I'll store that within a variable. Let answer equal add 2 and 3. Then let's console.log the answer, which should be 5. When you return something from a function, after you resolve the function, think of it as becoming whatever is returned. In this case, it's our result. Or otherwise, I can place this function within console.log if we don't plan to store it at all. So add 2 and 3, then display the result, which is 5. There is a shortcut too. You don't necessarily need to declare a variable within this function. We could shorten this to return x plus y. That is also valid, so that should return 5. Okay, let's create a subtract function. Function subtract will return x minus y. Well, we need a matching set of parameters because I forgot that. Okay, let's see what happens when we subtract 3 from 2. That'll give us -1. Let's multiply. Function multiply. We'll multiply x and y together. Return x times y. We will multiply 2 times 3, which is 6. Divide. We need parameters x and y. Then return x divided by y. Then we will invoke the divide function, pass in 2 and 3. And the result is 0.666 repeating. Let's go over a more complex example. We'll create a function to determine if a number is even or odd. Here's the function. And the result is 0.666 repeating. Let's go over a more complex example. We'll create a function to determine if a number is even or odd. Here's the function. Function is even. We have one parameter, a number. So when we invoke the function, we'll have to pass in a number. So when we receive a number, how do we check to see if this number is even? Here's one solution. We'll use an if statement. If our number modulus 2. Modulus gives you the remainder of any division. If this number divides by 2 evenly, if this is equal to 0, and yes, I'm using the strict equality operator, I'm trying to use that more often. If our number is divisible by 2, then let's return the Boolean value true. Else we'll return false. Okay. Let's console.log. Let's check to see if a number is even. Let's start with 10. Is 10 even? That is true. How about 11? That is false. 12? 12 is even. So that's kind of cool. If you would like a shortcut for this, you can use the ternary operator. That would look something like this. We are going to return then a condition. What are we checking? Is our number modulus 2 strictly equal to 0? Question mark. So that is the ternary operator, the question mark. If it is true, then we will return a Boolean value of true, colon, false, if it's false. Is 12 even? That is true. Is 13 even? No, it's not. It's odd. How about 14? That is true. All right, last example. I think we're probably getting the hang of this now. We'll create a function to see if an email is valid. Function is valid email. What kind of information are we going to send? We'll set that up as a parameter. We will need an email. We'll invoke the isValidEmail function and pass in an email. Why don't you type in your email? I'll just make one up. bro@fake.com. So when we invoke this function, this string of text will become our email. We'll check to see if our email contains the @ character. we'll use an if statement. If email, and there's a built-in method for this, the includes method. If our email includes the @ character, then we will return true. That is a valid email. They have the @ character. Else, we will return false. Is my email valid? That is true. Let's remove the @ character. Brofake.com. Maybe it's a website or something. That is false. Let's try another email. Again, we're going to invoke the function is valid email. ElonMusk.com. Don't actually go there. I don't know what's going to pop up. That is not a valid email. All right, how about Zuckerberg@meta.com? That is a valid email. It contains an @ character. And for something like this, if we're returning either true or false, we can use the ternary operator. Return. Then our condition is we're going to check if our email includes the @ character. Then add the ternary operator. If this is true, return true. Else, we will return false. So these should be the same, which they are. All right, everybody, so that's an introduction to functions. It's a section of reusable code. You declare some code once and use it whenever you want. You call the function to execute that code. If you need to send your function some data, you'll need a matching set of arguments and parameters. And you can return something too with the return keyword. We'll have more practice with this in the future, don't worry. And that is an introduction to functions in JavaScript.
It took me 5 years and dozens of failures to learn how to code. But what I learned along the way, I've turned into a framework, and I think this can help you learn how to code, and it can help expedite your journey. Like most people, I didn't know what I was doing when I was starting out. I didn't even know anyone that knew how to code or that worked in software, anything like that. I had to pick everything up from absolute zero. And because of that, I made a lot of mistakes. I did not have the most efficient absolute zero. And because of that, I made a lot of mistakes. I did not have the most efficient route into software. But these mistakes really taught me a lot of lessons. And working with other new students learning how to code for the first time, I've really gotten to solidify these and turn them into principles. Everyone is different, but this is what worked for me, and this is what I teach, and this is what I suggest for anyone else that's starting and learning how to code for the first time. Okay, so I'm going to tell you the process, the framework that worked for me for learning how to code. I mean, I didn't know this from the outset whatsoever, but I've kind of hobbled it together over time based off of my experience, my mistakes, and I've seen it work, and I see this framework kind of in almost every single developer's journey that I talk to. And so from the top down, the first thing I want to talk about here is what I refer to as the North Star. This is the highest level purpose and the reason that you want to learn how to code. And so the North Star will be different for everyone, but I think it's really the most important thing because becoming a developer is a very long journey. It takes, for many people, multiple years. And so you need to have a consistent, long-term, meaningful, big goal or reason behind why you're doing it. For me, for example, the reason that I wanted to learn how to code was, I guess at the highest level was really Bitcoin. For me, Bitcoin represented this new wave of technology that I thought was the most important technology in the world. Something that meant a lot to me, I thought would make the world a better place, and that I wanted to be a part of. I wanted to benefit from it. So that really there was a lot wrapped up in here, not just Bitcoin in itself, but it was something bigger. It was money, it was meaning, and it was mission. And so this might be a number of different things for you, but I mean, it really needs to be high level and persistent, something that keeps you motivated and, I mean, just keeps your eye on the North Star. Okay, and the next thing I will, just to stick with the theme here, I'm going to refer to it as the moon. That's kind of the moon there. But really what this is in MVP. And if you don't know what MVP stands for, that means a minimum viable product. It's a project that you are going to use as a goal for your coding journey, at least the beginning part of your coding journey. And so for this project, you want it to be a balance of something that is ambitious, but also realistic. And so you want it to be ambitious because you want it to be something that you really have to shoot for. It's not just a to-do list app, but something that you want to bring into the world that you think is cool. But then also you need to make it realistic. It can't be like, I'm going to reinvent the internet, or I'm going to create the first quantum computer. I mean, those are great ambitious goals, and really you can do that, go out and do it. But it needs to be something that's grounded, something that you could actually do as one person, or at least take a chunk of. So, a balance of realism and ambition. Okay, so the other thing that I think you want for this MVP is it needs to be something that's important or meaningful to you. Something like a gift. That's my attempt at drawing a gift, but it needs to be a gift to the world or a gift to yourself, right? Something that really drives you. And I'll have a story about this in a minute. And over time, this may look different than how you start at the outset. You might start with this big MVP from the outset, but maybe you only ever end up, not only, but maybe eventually your goal becomes that you complete this one important component of the MVP, and then you can kind of build it along the rest of the way like that. And the final reason that I think that this is a very important thing to do is to have a project that is a goal for yourself, is to use it as a measuring stick. And so this will be a measuring stick in the sense that you'll kind of know that you have the skills that you've wanted for the outset, right? The skills to get to this North Star. You'll sort of know that you have that skill set once you can build, or at least start to build, the important components of this MVP, of this project, right? So it is a measuring stick for your progress. It is a gift to yourself and the world, something that excites you. And it's a balance of realism and ambition. And I think that's a pretty good framework for this. But of course, for you to do any of this, you actually need to know how to code. And so that's where the bottom of this comes into play. And this is really the process. And I think of the process sort of like a pyramid. So the pyramid, this is basically, this represents all of the skills and the knowledge and the experience that you need to have to build the project that you want to build, and then eventually get to that overall goal or North Star that you want to get to. All of it is built on top of the pyramid of the process. And so this process has multiple layers to it. And really it's also structured, right? It's a structured approach. So maybe when you're starting out, you'll learn the very basics of how to code, like HTML and CSS. And maybe from there, you'll get to the next level and start making interactive web pages and front ends. And then maybe from there, you'll move on and start to learn about how to build backends and databases and APIs. right? And so there will be these set of skills, this set of knowledge and experience that you'll need. And so where are you going to find this? So some popular places are going to be, well, obviously people go to university for this, or maybe they'll go to a coding boot camp. But something easy that you can start with is, for example, freecodecamp.com. They will give you a curriculum. Or Code Academy, they'll give you curriculum. Or of course, I have my own platform, I have my own solution, PlebDevs, which we have our own dev journey. You can go to plebdevs.com and click Learn How to Code, and you can get started with a structured dev journey, just like that. So these are kind of 3 options where you might get a curriculum from that you'll follow to traverse this pyramid. Right, so you might check out Free Code Camp, Code Academy, or plebdevs.com. And so when I started learning how to code, the process, this is what was hardest for me. And something that bothered me about the beginner courses that I took for learning a basic programming language like Python is that, and I didn't know this at the time I just thought I was dumb, because I would always drop or fail or get stuck on these courses. But I find that the traditional approach is very labor intensive. It's very manual. So the traditional approach, they'll have you go through each row of these skills, learning every single detail, every single individual component of it one by one. And then you'll go through this, and then you'll skip and you'll go through the next one. And so this is a very manual process. And so something that I really like to emphasize is the 80-20 rule. And this is the idea that 20% of what there is to learn, you will be using 80% of the time. And I find that true. So that's the 80-20 rule. But then also taking a project-based approach to learning, right? So we're shooting for a big overall project that might take a year to build the skills to do. But instead of walking through every crevice of this pyramid, the plebdevs approach, how I like to do this, is going project by project. So we'll do a project at this level, kind of touching on each one of these little things. And then we'll jump to a project at this level. Boom, boom. And then we'll go to a project at this level. And what we're going to do with these is we are going to back them up to something called GitHub. And so GitHub is the platform that every single developer uses. It's where you will show off, back up, and collaborate with everything to do with software and with code. And what's great about it is that you can go through and build these projects and save them, back them up to GitHub, and have them live on as examples for you forever. So I don't need to remember every bit of the coding languages that I use. I have projects for every little thing I might need to do. I have examples of that. And so project-based approach, and then backing it up to GitHub. And so let's put a cloud there, because it's basically a cloud backup. And so another really cool thing about GitHub is that GitHub has something called a contribution chart, and the idea of contributions. And so what these are individual bits of code or work that you are doing on software, and they're publicly viewable in this beautiful chart. And so I think this is amazing, and it's been an important part of my journey. For one, because it's a cool game to play, to try and fill up all the squares and push code as many days as you can. So it's a good motivator. But then also, it is your proof of work. It's where you can show off that you are consistently writing and pushing code. And so that is a really cool aspect of GitHub that I think you should leverage and take advantage of. Okay, so now you have most of the components of the process here, right? First of all, there is a curriculum or a structured learning path that you're able to follow to figure out what it is you need to learn and some kind of order to do it. So a curriculum, a kind of structured learning path. You have like a daily goal or a daily motivator in the form of a contribution chart, trying to fill up those squares, put green in those squares, and push code, push contributions every day, even if they're small. And then you're backing up your progress, your projects along the way onto GitHub, so they live on as examples. And so what you're doing here through this process, yes, there's a lot to learn. It's a big pyramid to climb, but the whole way through this process, you're building up proof of work, you're building up momentum, you're building up a series of examples, but also these examples might get you hired one day, right? These examples represent experience and at the same time, your learning trajectory. So all of this together is a process where you can just go through, even if you have to do it multiple times, you go through the steps, you make a project, you go to the next level, you do it again, you go to the next level, and then maybe you work your way back down, you learn a little bit more along the way, or you get new additional projects that demonstrate these things along the way. New project, right? And so that is the process that you can follow. And that process, at a certain point when you are going through this MVP that we started with, that we kind of messed up here, you will start to figure out as you go through this process how you are going to be able to build this MVP. Because at the start, you may know what you want to build, but you're not going to know exactly how you're going to do it. And this is going to make more and more sense as you walk the journey. You're going to figure out you're going to add layers and layers of context and understanding onto this idea that you have until eventually it just glows. You know exactly how you're going to be able to do it. Once again, even if it is only a small starting component of it, right? Because it's MVP, which stands for minimum viable product. So we're just shooting for something that's a gift, something that's a measuring stick. Ambitious, but also realistic, right? And then from there, once you can build that MVP, you basically have the skills that you need to be able to reach that end goal that you want to get to. At least that's how it's been for me. And so I guess a bit more context for how all of this played out for me, how all of this looked for me. So I mentioned that like my North Star, my overall goal was kind of around Bitcoin, but it was also just meaning and mission and making basic money, because I was just a delivery driver before I knew how to code or I was involved in Bitcoin at all. And so Bitcoin kind of started me down this whole journey of thinking about software for the first time, where I hadn't considered it before, or even considered that I was smart enough or that I was the kind of person that could learn how to code. But it was the excitement that Bitcoin represented to me that sort of motivated me to figure out, is there some way I can learn how to code and be a part of the action? And so for me, I wanted to think of a project that would help me reach my mission of being a software developer in Bitcoin, but would solve a problem that I cared about, would be a gift to myself or a gift to the world. And it was something ambitious, it was something also somewhat realistic, and it was definitely a measuring stick. This project was something called FB Explorer, which stands for Facebook Explorer. And so this is the final name it ended up with, but it started as just this dumb idea that I had in the middle of the night of like, what if I could track all of my data from all my different social media profiles and put it all into one place, and it'd be this sort of like data-rich timeline or thing that you could use to have intelligence on yourself or train AIs on. And so I wrote down just a few random name ideas on a sticky note, and I put it on my dresser. And this was about 8 or 9 years ago, and it's still on my dresser today. I have this little video of it. And so this was an idea that was just in the back of my head. It was early. It was a cool idea. And it was very big. It was very ambitious. But the component of what I ended up here, of that ambitious idea of combining all of your social media profiles together, I started with just FB Explorer. And this was a way to just download and explore and take control of all of your Facebook data and do it through UI. It took me many steps into this journey before I could even start to figure out how I would build something like this, or if it was even possible. And then from there, it took me multiple tries. Actually, quite literally, it took me 13 tries, just starting over again to get this right. But I had this, it was such a goal. I have to be able to build this. It's this basic important thing of this idea that I care about. And eventually FB Explorer actually became a newer version. I built it successfully. I reached this goal, which was amazing. And I actually built an updated version of it, which is called Reclaim. And Reclaim included Facebook and it had Twitter data as well. So I built on the idea. I added Twitter to it as well. I made it cleaner. I made it more efficient. And that was cool. And from here, I was able to reach up into my North Star. And really, I decided actually at this point that this is not a thing I want to work on anymore. What it takes to solve this, I don't want to build. But I had no hard feelings. It was such an enriching experience to bring this to life, to iterate on it, to get real users, and then to then be able to move on to different things, and really things that are more specific to Bitcoin, right? Because this idea was not super specific to Bitcoin, but it was something that motivated me. That's why I stuck with it, right? And then for me, the process is what took years and years. I spent years in this zone, in the process, and figuring this out, which is why I think that my framework here is so valuable for you. But just these steps right here of like basic coding, and then, you know, maybe intermediate coding, and then we'll say maybe semi-advanced coding. These three steps, especially this first step right here, took me 2 years, 2 or 3 years, right? It was a really long grind, but it didn't have to be that way. What was missing was just the full process, backing up my projects like I was talking about, using the GitHub chart as motivation, following a good structured learning path, and then all the way just building projects. So this is what I've learned. This is what I've taken away. You need to have the meaning to overall drive you through the full journey. You need to have a project to shoot after, and you need to have a process to learn and to gain experience. Once again, this is just my framing. This is my approach that I found to work for me and for other students. But if this sounds interesting to you, if this is compelling, then please check out plebdevs.com and click on that Learn to Code button. And that will drop you right into the free starter course, which will get you set up with a code editor, teach you some basic HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and just get you on that dev journey. I want to help you with your dev journey. This is why I'm building Pleb Devs. So please tell me what you want, tell me what you need, and let me know what you think about the videos and about the platform I put together. So thank you. I'll see you next time.
It's just give it small person. Just picture and then I'm aiming to build SQL software, academics, projects, experience, and business. It's native, interesting, experience. This is why it's very nice to have kids. If So, that's all. So, maybe switching from means a child is name is shows description then dog mode and then academics sixth form and then languages so zone two languages Yoruba fluent and business projects the same you know come soon something like come soon no stop okay now I don't know about schools and then launch so connect connect with email and email number email Twitter origin exactly alright let's do this now write the document this is a little bit more this that's okay so right good right you
Let's learn everything we need to know about GitHub as if we were a complete beginner as fast as possible. Welcome back, y'all. I'm going to show you everything we need to know about GitHub when it comes to software development, web app development, why we even use GitHub. And the reason I'm creating this video actually is because I realized I've done a ton of content when it comes to how to approach coding if you have no experience using artificial intelligence. And I just gotta go over GitHub, right? This is like one of the most fundamental things for software development to understand. So let me just break it down as easy as possible. Everything you should really know about this platform. First major thing. What's amazing is that basically for most of what you want to do, you won't have to pay a single dime. This is completely free. Simply just sign up. I'll leave a link in the description down below. So then your second question might be is when would I pay for this? That's when you transition from a solo to a small team to much more of a GitHub organization. And even then when managing and running teams, you're looking at $4 a month for a seat. Regardless though, let's just see what this is about. So I'm going to come up here, I'm going to click my name, and I'm going to say your profile. So this page right here is kind of like the collection of everything that's going on. First thing I want you to understand, repositories. What is a repository? This is where we store our code in the cloud. If you've created something with Windsurf, Cursor, VS Code, like you know where that code is at within that what we call IDE, integrated development environment. Like when you're playing around with the code on here, that's on your machine. That's local. We like to use things like GitHub so we can put this in the cloud. Putting in the cloud has a ton of different advantages, which we'll jump into. The first thing you just need to understand as a baseline is a repository is where we store our code. Second thing that you may be looking at is 25 contributions. Anytime there is a green little dot here for a date, that just means when you actually push something to a repo publicly. And then obviously that's just your profile. So let's actually look at a repository here. We're going to create a new one just to kind of walk through it a little bit. So the idea is this. We have our owner, that's going to be you as a individual, and then your repo name. This could be public facing if it is a public repository. So I can just put test here. Next is going to be whether or not it's public or private. So public means anyone on the internet could find this repository, find the code in it, and take it, or use it, or download it. Private is very clear in the sense of once you make it private, only you as an account owner has access to this code. Now, when it comes to setting this all up, connecting GitHub here to VS Code here, I'm gonna leave a video down below that shows you how to do with Cursor AI. Very simple. Connect both GitHub and your IDE so you can start doing pushes and commits with branches. What I want to go over in this video though is what to understand fundamentally about your repo in general. So I have a repo here that I created in a 2-hour and 30-minute series when it came to creating a backend. So let's walk through this user interface a little bit so it doesn't look so crazy. So the first major thing that you need to understand when looking at this is what we call branches. So right now there is only one branch, main. Here's what that means. We have a line here, means when you actually push something to a repo publicly, and then obviously that's just your profile. So let's actually look at a repository here. We're gonna create a new one just to kind of walk through it a little bit. So the idea is this: we have our owner, that's gonna be you as a individual, and then your repo name. This could be public facing if it is a public repository. So I can just put test here. Next is going to be whether or not it's public or private. So public means anyone on the internet could find this repository, find the code in it, and take it, or use it, or download it. Private is very clear in the sense of once you make it private, only you as an account owner has access to this code. Now, when it comes to setting this all up, connecting GitHub here to VS Code here, I'm going to leave a video down below that shows you how to do with Cursor AI. Very simple. Connect both GitHub and your IDE so you can start doing pushes and commits with branches. What I want to go over in this video though is what to understand fundamentally about your repo in general. So I have a repo here that I created in a 2-hour and 30-minute series when it came to creating a backend. So let's walk through this user interface a little bit so it doesn't look so crazy. So the first major thing that you need to understand when looking at this is what we call. This is where we store our code.
the top of the page. Tap on the three dots. Hit next up, tap the profile picture to show X to the profile. Open the X hub. Tap your profile picture. Channel. Tap the three dots or the share icons from the share option. Yeah. So, change that.
Build a website you love with Wix. For your words.
Hey everyone, Force Restart here. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to on that share icon that's pointing upward. So tap on that, and it's going to open up. You're going to see a lot of stuff up. And once you open up your app here, you're going to tap on your profile on the left-hand corner, and then tap on profile again. And then once you get to your profile, you're going to see a lot of stuff here going on. But basically, you're going to find one of your posts that you have done here. It doesn't matter, any post. So you can click on that share icon that's pointing upward. So tap on that. And it's going to open up a share post. So you're going to want to do is copy link. And once you copy the link here, go ahead and open up any kind of notes or anything that you can paste it in. So I'm going to paste it into a note here by tapping and paste. And basically, you're going to want to go back all the way back and erase everything else besides the word that goes right after up to status. And that's going to be your link. Basically, it's x.com.
Send this. So, so, okay, send. Development. Yeah, click on this. Okay. And profile. Link. And later. And it's in It's going to be so. YouTube, and then it's my Instagram. It's my Angles. It's not that. I said this level. It's from names to help the heart. This is cool. Okay. Yeah.
In the cloud. If you've created something with Windsurf, Cursor, VS Code, like you know where that code is at within that what we call IDE, integrated development environment. Like when you're playing around with the code on here, that's on your machine. That's local. We like to use things like GitHub so we can put this in the cloud. Putting in the cloud has a ton of different advantages, which we'll jump into. The first thing you just need to understand as a baseline is a repository is where we store our code. Second thing that you may be looking at is 25 contributions. Anytime there's a green little dot here for a date, that just means when you actually push something to a repo publicly. And then obviously that's just your profile. So let's actually look at a repository here. We're going to create a new one just to kind of walk through it a little bit. So the idea is this. We have our owner, that's going to be you as a individual, and then your repo name. This could be public facing if it is a public repository. So I can just put test here. Next is going to be whether or not it's public or private. So public means anyone on the internet could find this repository, find the code in it, and take it, or use it, or download it. Private is very clear in the sense of once you make it private, only you as an account owner has access to this code. Now, when it comes to setting this all up, connecting GitHub here to VS Code here, I'm gonna leave a video down below that shows you how to do with Cursor AI. Very simple. Connect both GitHub and your IDE so you can start doing pushes and commits with branches. What I want to go over in this video though is what to understand fundamentally about your repo in general. So I have a repo here that I created in a 2-hour and 30-minute series when it came to creating a backend. So let's walk through this user interface a little bit so it doesn't look so crazy. So the first major thing that you need to understand when looking at this is what we call branches. So right now there is only one branch, main. Here's what that means. We have a line here, and this is main. Main is how the code exists right now. So all these files, source, Python functions, that's how the code exists now. What we do when we create a branch is we're taking this exact code of how it sits now, and we're creating a duplication of the code. So we'll come over here, exact same code. We're naming it, so we'll just say new footer, or just say new, but new F for new footer. Footer like the footer of the website. New footer has the exact same code as main branch, exact same. But the reason we're creating this branch is so that when we start making changes to the code file, e.g. we come over here, we go to our source, let's just say we go to app.js, and we change something here, that won't affect the original main branch. When I make a change in new F, new footer, that doesn't change the main branch code. This is a whole separate branch now that's built off the main branch. So what this allows us to do is that when I'm in new F, the branch, and I make a change in the code, I keep going, I keep going, I keep going, I like it. At any point, if I mess up, so I keep going down that path, I'm adding code, I'm changing files. If at any point I mess up and I completely break the application, or I'm just like, what's going on? what I can do is simply delete this branch if I chose to go this extreme. Delete this branch, and I'm back at main. Main hasn't been touched. Main's all good. Main's where I left it. That's one of the reasons why we do branches, so that we don't mess with the main branch. And the reason the main branch is so fundamental, this is supposed to be the code that's not broken. It functionally works throughout. Now, yes, obviously, when you're just starting, it's going to be like, okay, well, the code doesn't work anyways because I just started. Well, that's fine. But the idea is that the main branch is never really supposed to update unless it's absolutely clear that the new code that it's updating with is good to go. So what does that mean in this context is, let's assume that I kept going down this little path of new F, new footer. Then what we can do here, and we're assuming the code is actually good, like everything looks good, we like it, we do something called merge. And that's when we merge back to main. And then we'll delete new F because it's no longer needed, as all the code changes that were here has now been merged back to main. So now main's updated with all the code there. So we delete new F. So now we have a new version of main. So your next question might be, is Corbin, how do I merge? This is what we call a pull request. So we can check out some closed ones here. When you have a new branch, so for example here, we created auth done. This is when we added authentication to this repo. I can click it. What this was is, notice, a commit from main, that main branch, from the auth branch. And what we do here, and notice how it says merge as well, there were files changed. These files changed are what's different from the original code in the main to now auth. So for example, if I went to my source app.js, the green means it was added, the red means it was removed. In the auth branch, we added these two lines, which means in the main branch at this point before merging it, they don't exist. Therefore, once we merge though from auth to main, now they exist. This workflow is called PR request. It's not absolutely necessary. If you're really a true beginner and you're just learning and just wanting to go, you don't have to do new branches, new PRs, and all this craziness. You could just keep committing to main. There's no reason you can't. It's just not a good practice long term. I also want to make clear that in that video I referenced at the beginning of this one, I go over showing you how to do all this in terminal and actually doing the commands and teaching you step by step here. This video I want to make very high level so you can kind of understand what the heck is the point of a PR and all these different things that you see like right off the bat. Therefore, let me show you an effective way that you can actually download public repos so you can start playing around, and you can even download this one right here. The way we're going to do this, because this doesn't require an SSH key or any type of access token, as I go over in other videos, is all we need to do is simply copy this HTTPS. You're going to come over to your IDE, like VS Code, Cursor AI, and what you want to do is just simply showing you how to do all this in terminal and actually doing the commands and teaching you step by step here.
What do we suggest? So, so you need to be a code that web browser return browser echo get version control to track changes and sync with GitHub and start game. This number for Windows. Version control to track changes and sync with GitHub. Install GitHub account. Choose your code and deploy via GitHub pages. I do want that. Install that. Optional recommended. Nav server extension for It's okay, so this folder, create a new folder for a personal website, e.g. personal sites. Okay, so let's go to this one. Documents, new folder, personal website. Inside the website, index.html, style, css, and script.js. Okay. Open folder. Personal website. Select folder. Create a new folder. There's a personal website inside. Create designs. Okay. Index.html. Script.js. Comment. Install live server extension. We already have that. Setting up Git on GitHub.
Hi everyone, this is the biofeedback on the user.
Pros and cons. Like CircuitPython was seemed to be the right one for our board, but there were not cons. Like Circuit. I'm Gabriel, and I'm going to be talking about the software. So we tried out different programming languages and different IDEs. So we started off with MicroPython and CircuitPython. They both had their pros and cons. Like CircuitPython was seemed to be the right one for our board, but there were not enough resources online for us to code the sensors. And MicroPython was a little harder to use, but there were a lot of online resources. However, it was not working with the sensors, so we ended up doing something else. So with the IDEs, when we were working with MicroPython and CircuitPython, we used we tried out the Mu editor, Thonny, and VS Code. But in the end, we ended up using Arduino and C++ because it allowed us to upload the code onto the board, and it had the serial plotter and serial monitor, which is a very convenient way to display the data we got from the sensors. And after we got the data from the sensors, we exported it from the serial monitor into the Google Colab, where we had a Python script which graphed the data. And for the BLE Click, which is essentially a Bluetooth device attached to our board, we used a software called Smart Snippet Studio and a software on our phone called Smart Console.
I'm Jay. I'll be going over the ECG data, one of the devices that Stasia talked about.
I don't really fully understand the gates. It's GitHub. GitHub. It's GitHub. Okay, new repository. New repository. Okay, name it to the personal things. Assume actual sense exception. So?